blah, blah, blah. Blah 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 blah.
You submitted your country report to related to status of civil society in Turkey. What are basic problems for civil society these days in Turkey?
What I can say, if you look at on the terms of criteria of enabling environment for civil society, there are several issues that you have to look at. If you look at the general atmosphere of how civil society and civic engagement is, there are severe problems. We always had it, but recently with big law cases and persecutions, which also involved some activists, that created a lot of distrust among the civic population towards associations, foundations. So democratically speaking, in the atmosphere, political atmosphere of Turkey, it's not the best time, first of all, for any kind of civil activism going on. Some activists that we interviewed during our old monitoring reports, etc., they were feeling quite, I wouldn't say dangerous, but threatened in a way, or afraid of really speaking out, especially human rights activists were feeling as such. On the other hand, of course, these persecutions and etc. are not directly related with civil society activity, but because it involves that, and the media in Turkey loves to publish more or to broadcast more that aspect of the big court cases or persecutions going on, people have a more, I would say, relatively low levels of trust towards civil society and engagement in general. That's first side. Secondly, the legal framework is still quite regulatory, mostly concentrated on penalties rather than freedoms. And that's also still a big problem. A lot of NGOs in Turkey, which we don't have enough NGOs for that whole population. We're like 75 to 80 million people, but we only have, like, I could say 10,000 NGOs all over, including foundations and associations. So basically speaking, the regulations are so complex and it's not structured and easy to follow. So people and NGOs are having quite a lot of difficulties in terms of fulfilling the legal requirements. They have to pay high penalties either, or just, their NGOs sometimes had to be closed down because of several severe problems. As on a third aspect, I could say, when you look at the civil society side, still there is not enough, I would say, awareness that they need to be more accountable. And accountability is an important issue. That's for the civil society part. So we need to establish more awareness and structures for being more accountable towards the public and their constituencies. Basically speaking, we can say that all these three in general are like the highlights of all in terms of civil society organizations side.
Yes, and you presented your report among the reports from the countries of Western Balkan. How you see similarities or differences? Which are the basic similarities and maybe some main differences among the status of civil society in Western Balkans and Turkey?
Let me start with the differences. In terms of differences, it was more on the legal and the law side, not implementation, making the law and preparing the laws and the already legal framework. I've seen that in the other countries in the Western Balkans, the legislation is more improved. There's very high pace of improvement in terms of better legislations for enabling environment. In that terms, I think we are differing. In Turkey, it has been very slow since 2005. It's basically nearly stagnated, I could say. Already our country had promised a lot of things to the EU in terms of doing better legislation and all, which is still not there. They always say it's in process, but we didn't see the laws yet. That's the difference. However, if you look at the implementation, we shared similar problems. So already some of our friends in other countries in the Western Balkans did have legislations. It was not implemented on a huge level, and that's also our problem. So differences and similarities, I could say. Unfortunately, it seems that the public sector in Turkey and also in the Western Balkans, it seems, are not that aware or that ready yet to make partnerships, real partnerships with civil society.
Yes, that's definitely fact in Croatia. We mentioned civil society. Other corrective civil I mean society factors such as media. Media also have some troubles in Turkey. Can you tell us a little bit about media status?
What happened was, again, as I was speaking about these huge, big court cases and persecutions going on in Turkey, to a level as those cases affected the civil society, it also affected the media. There were also media professionals persecuted. Some of them had penalties. Some of them are in jail. Some of them are still just waiting for their trials. That was also a lot of impact on the media. First, it started more on I would say maybe autocensorism, but in the end, we started to see a lot of relatively alternative media writers or journalists quitting their jobs. But nobody knows if it's real quitting or not. They did feel some kind of pressure, we could say, from the media side, I mean, from the companies, etc. And the government seems to be also, at any point, when anything happens, you do feel and you do see that the first thing attack was through the media. You are writing these, you are doing this. So when you look at it from the civil society side, all the civil society organizations we interviewed, in terms of trying to see how their relations continuing with the media, they've been saying that they are not able to find any space anymore in the media. Whereas I could say 4 or 5 years ago, it was relatively easier to find a space in the mainstream media also. Now we only have the alternative media, 1 or 2, which are basically really having so hard times to live. They are the only tools that you could access. So looking at it from, I mean, that's what my experience is from the civil society side. They're really having difficulties to find alternative media to access to the public, to say something alternative.
Definitely, and maybe just shortly for the end, all this trouble related to media freedoms and journalist status in Turkey and some problems with civil society status, which I would say are both related to the status of democratic reforms in Turkey currently. How you see the follow-up? I mean, how you see where it would develop?
Well, the fact is, if you look at the process, I am not that optimistic for the short run, I can say. When I mean short run, definitely we don't expect much until 2013 anyway. And there are several reasons. Some of the reasons it comes from the presidency of Republic of Cyprus. It seems that there will be a problem anyway with the EU accession process. We'll see, but that was from the government side. And after that, we're having elections this end of year. So, I mean, I look really pessimistic for specifically this year. And upcoming short term, I think we have to follow up, but it's really not promising. I can say only that at this point. It's not promising, but there are a lot of civil society organizations monitoring and watching and trying to report it at any facts. There are also, I mean, interestingly, you could find more improved or more developed people among the public who are open for work. So we can make or work together, etc. And they do have good intentions, but at the end, they're not the authority to decide. So it's not going really in the decision-making influence.
Blah, blah, blah.
We were mentioning media quite much here, and that was an issue that was brought up in particular from the Croatia, because maybe some other countries still struggling with some other issues, and now we are seeing, okay, we maybe tried already to solve some, but we didn't touch media at all. How you see the issue of media today?
I mean, I think the discussion, the fact, I'm also glad the issue of the media has been highlighted, and I think it's coming up from two directions. I think one is, you know, the concerns that we all have that throughout Europe, in one way or another, pluralism in the media, freedom of expression is become something to worry about. I mean, this is incredible, but of course it's happening from Italy under Berlusconi, with ownership of practically all the television, to Hungary, with the government trying to interfere. In the UK, we've had big debates about the media everywhere.
Yes.
Murdoch, etc., everywhere. So that's one way the media are becoming a focal point. But the other way is the first point we discussed, which is connecting civil society much more to the citizen. And I don't know how you do that unless you've got the media on your side. I mean, you have to have the media to translate your concerns as civil society into the newspapers and radio, you know, about the issues of fighting corruption,
force
or
of connecting you with the public. It's
exactly
like that.
Exactly. So this explains why this issue has come up. I think it shows it's another proof, if you like, that civil society has progressed a lot more, because it's not just a question of our own business here. It's how we relate to other groups like the media and form stronger coalitions.
The media were part of Copenhagen criteria, and they were not tackled in negotiation process apart from this commercial.
Yes.
So how you can explain that?
Well, I can explain it first, because in the area of competition policy, the European Union has a high level of legal competence. I mean, it can send people in to inspect what's going on in the offices of the media. It can fine them. It has real power. When it comes to the relationship of the media with the government, or what is put into press laws and things, there the legal authority of the Union is much less. It's left to member states. On the other hand, we now have a Charter of Fundamental Rights, which is like the citizens' initiatives. It's new with the Lisbon Treaty. So there too, there's a kind of process of the European institutions trying to work out to what extent they can use this charter. I mean, the European Parliament, for example, will be pushing for it to be used much more extensively. The European Commission is much more cautious about its division of powers between, say, the European level and the member states. So it's not easy, but I think things go a bit in the right direction. A bit in the right direction, but it's too early to forecast.
Yeah. And you know, we were wondering, because we knew that media are part, and the media freedoms are part of Copenhagen criteria, and everybody claims that Copenhagen criteria and the rule of law and the freedom of media are that important. And then we end up finishing negotiation and nothing had been done in that sense.
One thing to learn in the European Union is that life isn't fair. And that's just something to live with, and probably to say, okay, let's distance ourselves from all that stuff, and let's go out and collect signatures behind the Citizens' Initiative on media pluralism, because that will be what will provoke the debate.
Yeah, maybe to decrease expectations that somebody from abroad
will solve your problem and start to do it yourself.
So it's our thing to do.
Yeah, because these treaties are not the property of governments and EU institutions. They're also our property.
Blah, blah, blah.
Kakva je uloga Vijeća za medije?
Vijeće za štampu, Vijeće za tisak u Bosni i Hercegovini je prvo samoregulacijsko tijelo za štampu, a evo od prije 2 godine i za online medije. Samoregulacija znači da sami novinari, urednici uređuju svoj profesionalni prostor bez uplitanja vlade, politike ili bilo koga drugog sa strane. Što znači bez kažnjavanja, ali sa punom svjesnošću odgovornosti posla kojeg obavljaju, uređuju svoj profesionalni prostor slijedeći kodeks za štampu i online medije i naravno popravljajući greške. Novinar je živo biće, trči, radi, napravi grešku nesvjesno, ne s namjerom i to je jako važno da greška kada se učini nije učinjena s namjerom i da je novinar spreman, urednik spreman da popravi tu grešku. Naravno, greške se popravljaju objavom ispravke, isprike, novoga teksta. Važno je samo da se da prava informacija građanima jer mi radimo kao novinari u interesu građanstva.
Koliko mislite, često se govori o tome regulacija nasuprot samoregulacije u medijima. Koliko mislite da se može riješiti regulacijom, a koliko je važna samoregulacija?
Pa osobno i kao novinar i evo kao neko ko već 7 godina vodi samoregulacijsko tijelo u ovom regionu, ja mislim da je samoregulacija za nas, za novinare, jako bitna. Zato što potvrđuje slobodu izvještavanja, potvrđuje slobodu uredničke politike, a bez slobodnog novinarskog izvješćivanja mi nemamo ni slobodu dijeljenja informacije, niti imamo dobar temelj za razvoj demokracije. Bez slobodnih medija, bez slobode izgovora, bez slobode govora, ne samo u medijima, već i među građanima, mi ne možemo graditi demokraciju. Kod nas još uvijek su građanstvo stisnuti i ne usuđuju se tako često podignuti glas na nepravde kojih, nažalost, još uvijek strašno puno ima unaokolo. No, mediji su ti koji treba da ih ohrabre u tome. Znači, mediji treba da podižu građansku, demokratsku svijest. Kako će to raditi ako nisu slobodni? Zbog toga je samoregulacija jako važna, budući da bez odgovornosti sloboda postaje anarhija. Ako mi sada se borimo za slobodno novinarstvo, imamo puno pravo, daje nam je Konvencija o ljudskim pravima i temeljnim slobodama, posebno član 10 u demokraciji, onda moramo na jednakom tasu imati i odgovornost prema toj slobodi. Znači, samoregulacija je proces koji je malo sporiji, ali zasigurno vrlo vrijedan i učinkovit u svojoj finalizaciji, u konačnici da razvije slobodno i odgovorno izvješćivanje putem medija.
Evo, rekli ste radite 7 godina, što nije predugo, ali jeste jedan značajan period u odnosu recimo na Hrvatsko vijeće za medije, odnosno za štampu koje radi.
Ja radim 7 godina u vijeću, inače vijeće postoji u Bosni i Hercegovini već 12 godina.
To je
od 2000.
zaista
godine.
solidan period. Dakle, vi ste skoro 12 godina u prednosti pred Hrvatskom. Imate iskustva koliko je vijeće do sad doprinijelo, evo recimo općenito položaju novinarske struke u Bosni i Hercegovini. Znamo da se danas drvljem i kamenjem udara po novinarskoj struci kako su svi kriteriji u opadanju. Mislite li da ste uspjeli doprinijeti unapređenju?
Pa znate šta, pomaci su vidljivi, ali u masi jako ružnih stvari oko nas, ne u medijima samo, već u cijeloj politici, u društvu, u čitavoj društveno-ekonomsko-političkoj situaciji, to se ne vidi ako baš niste u medijskoj zajednici pa da pratite napredak. Evo, reći ću na konkretnim primjerima. Kada sam ja počela raditi u Vijeću za tisak pred 7 godina, niti jedna novina nije objavljivala ispravke, demantije. Mi danas imamo 90, možda čak i više procenata objavljenih reagiranja. Imamo magazine, dnevne novine koje imaju čak posebne stranice odvojene za reagiranje čitatelja, za ispravke navoda. To nisu pisma čitatelja kao što je nekada bilo, pa sad pišem šta mi se sviđa ili ne sviđa u životu, već ispravke navoda. To je jako bitno, to je veliki pomak. Također, ono što smo kao veliki pomak učinili, mislim ogroman, jedino Švedska radi tako nešto, je edukacija sudija. Mi smo ušli u pravosuđe, teškom mukom moram reći, ali jednom kada smo našli zajedničko tlo to jako lijepo ide i razvijamo sve bolje i bolje tu suradnju. Suradnja je na što boljoj praktičnoj primjeni Zakona o zaštiti od klevete. Bosna i Hercegovina je dekriminalizirala klevetu također 2000. godine i njena primjena tog novog zakona nije bila sretna. Budući da i sudije prvi put su se susreli sa nečim što je novo kada je kleveta u pitanju i tužbe po medijima. Jer su morali razlikovati šta je sloboda izvješćivanja, šta je istraživački tekst, šta je vijest, šta je članak, šta je komentar, šta je kartun, kako se to kaže, satira, šta je ironija. To su nepoznanice, što je normalno. Toga nema na pravnim fakultetima, niti u advokatskim kancelarijama, niti u sudskim specijalizacijama. Tako da smo mi razvili u Vijeću za štampu poseban program edukacije sudija i oni su to prihvatili objeručke. Sada oni daju prijedloge šta je to što bi im još trebalo dati, jer su vidjeli koliko im je lakše raditi sa tim tužbama na medije. Evo, nedavno su iz Visokog sudskog i tužilačkog vijeća došli do mene da vidimo da li možemo za sljedeću godinu organizirati nekoliko okruglih stolova dijaloga između tužitelja i novinara. Jer odjednom je počela neka nova atmosfera da se događa, ok, radimo u interesu javnosti, hajmo raditi što bolje. I da zaštitimo ono što treba biti zaštićeno od informacija, da se ne bi ugrozio sudski postupak, ali i da se da određena prava informacija građanima koji očekuju tu informaciju. Jer novinar mora imati informaciju, kakvu takvu. Dakle, sud, tužiteljstvo mora imati čovjeka koji će dati pravu informaciju. Inače će novinar uzeti od portira, ako ne, ni od kog drugog. Ako sudovi, ako tužiteljstva nemaju određenog čovjeka koji će dati informaciju, novinar će pokupiti tu informaciju od koga stigne. Zbog toga je, recimo u ovom periodu, kako smo počeli raditi s njima, sudovi, tužiteljstva osnovali su presurede ili ako nemaju zvanični presured, imaju čovjeka koji daje informaciju. Imaju mailing liste, što nisu imali ranije.
Što je veliki pomak.
Da, i to imaju zajedničku adresu pravosuđe.ba. Ogromni su pomaci. Kad ovako, sad vam mogu nabrajati, nemamo toliko vremena, ali ono što je najbitnije za nas, za novinarsku, medijsku zajednicu, da jako puno sudija sada u presudama, kada su tužbe za medije u pitanju, pozivaju se na kodeks za štampu. Da li je prekršen ili nije, često zovu kao ekspertizu da urade i ljudi iz Vijeća za štampu. Ja sam nekoliko puta bila na sličnim procesima i mnogo je više nego smanjen je broj presuda protiv medija. Nije smanjen broj tužbi, ali je definitivno smanjen broj presuda protiv medija. Ono što je jako puno pomoglo je da smo dovodili na seminare za naše sudije i tužitelje ljude sa suda u Strasburu, da oni na praktičnim primjerima pokažu kako rade kada su tužbe na medije u pitanju i kako uvijek idu u korist medija ako baš nije neka teška kleveta u pitanju.
Dakle, u svakom slučaju u Bosni i Hercegovini vidimo to pitanje klevete se rješava na jedan puno bolji način. No, kriminalizacija klevete jeste jedan od vodećih problema novinarima i danas. Možete nam samo malo usporediti kako je to u drugim zemljama, susjedama, drugim zemljama Zapadnog Balkana? Ima li možda nekih razvoja koji nisu tako povoljni u tom kontekstu?
Pa, trude se kolege da idu u boljem pravcu. Prošle godine je dekriminalizirana kleveta u Crnoj Gori. I evo baš za koji dan jedan sudija i ja idemo raditi sa novinarima i sudijama da nekako im predočimo kako mi to radimo, edukaciju u Bosni i Hercegovini. U Srbiji također se radi na tom polju i od prošle godine aktivni savjet za štampu, Savjet za štampu u stvari, također je prišao udruženjima sudija da bi aplicirali sličnu edukaciju. Znači, mi jedni od drugih učimo. Mi smo dosta radili s kolegama iz Hrvatske i stalno smo u kontaktu sa novoosnovanim Vijećem za medije. Iskreno želimo da čim prije postane aktivno. Za nas je to sve jako važno jer smo povezani. Jako puno medija je domaći medij na svakom terenu. Štampa se prodaje u svakoj zemlji i puno recimo žalbi mi smo dobijali ranije na pisanje štampe iz Srbije ili iz Hrvatske i onda smo mi to morali rješavati, mada u biti urednici nisu uopće odgovorni prema Vijeću za štampu u Bosni i Hercegovini ako im je redakcija u Hrvatskoj ili Srbiji. Da. Sada kada postoje Vijeća za štampu i u svim zemljama mi samo procesuiramo te naše žalbe, da kažem, a njima šaljemo žalbe koje se odnose na medije iz njihovih zemalja. Mi moramo biti povezani u tom smislu.
Vratimo se malo na status medija općenito na ovom prostoru. Evo, sudjelovali ste ovdje na konferenciji u Zadru koja govori o statusu civilnog društva i kao osoba iz medija postavili ste i pitanje a gdje su mediji u ovom procesu pridruživanja. Dakle, sve naše zemlje, evo sad smo ih spominjali, su ili u statusu kandidatkinje ili u statusu potencijalnih kandidatkinja. Hrvatska je evo i završila pregovore, ali nismo vidjeli da se dogodila neka velika promjena vezana uz medije. Kako to obrazlažete?
Pa, nažalost, u Hrvatskoj se dogodila promjena, ali u negativnom pravcu. Da. Hrvatska je nama svima bila uzor i kao vrlo pozitivan primjer kako mediji mogu vrlo brzo u demokratskom nekom pravcu da se razvijaju i onda je odjednom krenulo nizbrdo, čak završilo sa ubistvima. Generalno, u cijelome regionu je stravična situacija u medijima. Mediji se optužuju da su krivi za lošu političku situaciju, lošu ekonomsku situaciju. Često među građanima možete čuti da nije medija, sve bilo dobro. Mediji samo odslikavaju ono što je u društvu. Mi ne možemo izmisliti priču. Mislim, nažalost, neki izmišljaju. Ali mi ne možemo izmisliti situaciju da je bolja nego što jeste. Mislim da definitivno sve naše zemlje, govorim posebno o Bosni i Hercegovini u kojoj evo živim, sticajem okolnosti, trebaju drastičnu promjenu cijelog političkog sustava i cijele garniture političara. Mi trebamo nove, mlade, svježe, friške snage koje razumijevaju šta je demokracija, koje razumijevaju nove tehnologije, koje razumijevaju što znači novi život u nekom novom sistemu.
Nekorumpirane po mogućnosti.
Neću sad da budem previše optimistična. I to naravno. Ali u biti kad pogledate prosjek aktualnih političara u Bosni i Hercegovini, većina njih su političari koji su bili aktualni i u prošlom sistemu. I šta su oni donijeli ovdje? Ništa. Samo su promijenili predznak. Umjesto plus stavili minus ili obrnuto, kako god. Ali ono što nisu promijenili je da su oni centar zbivanja. Njihova svjesnost demokracije je -0. Za njih građanstvo ne postoji, osim da im da glas da bi oni nastavili biti centar zbivanja. Znači, govoreći o tome, dolazimo do toga da oni smatraju kad su mediji u pitanju, da su mediji tu da njima služe. A ne da oni putem medija daju dobru, pravu, pravovremenu informaciju građanima kao svojim glasačima i konačno poreskim obveznicima koji ih itekako izdašno plaćaju od svojih malih primanja ili minimalnih primanja i neredovnih, da kažem. U Bosni i Hercegovini je stravična situacija. Mi nismo nikada imali takav politički pritisak, otvoren, javan, besraman, kao što ga imamo posljednjih mjeseci. Posebno na javne servise. Imamo 3 javna servisa, 2 entitetska, 1 za cijelu Bosnu i Hercegovinu. Svi su pod, ali malo je reći, napadom, već direktno je uplitanje politike u rad, uredničku politiku, u postavljanje urednika. Urednici se na konkursu za javni servis biraju da li su Srbin, Hrvat, Bošnjak ili ne znam da li može biti ono and others kao
ali
duhovi,
evo, medija,
a ne profesionalci, što je najgore.
Da, sloboda medija jeste kopenhaški kriterij i Hrvatska ga je u procesu pregovora imala kao takvog, dakle u istoj razini sa vladavinom prava. Mislite li da će u Bosni i Hercegovini proces pristupanja u stvari unaprijediti tu situaciju? I vidite li da možete promijeniti nešto da iskoristite taj proces?
Pa mi mijenjamo, ali ne mijenja ga vlada. Mijenjaju ga civilne organizacije, kao Vijeće za štampu, kao BH novinari. Mi ga mijenjamo. Vlada mora da shvati da ono što je dato kao preporuke Vijeća Evrope i kao što se traži u ispunjenju pristupnom ispunjenju, da ima dobru samoregulaciju, da ima slobodne medije, neovisne medije, da ona to mora poštovati. Vijeće Europe je 2008. godine dalo indikatore za mjerenje medijskih sloboda u zemljama članicama, parlamentima država članica. Niti jedan parlament u regionu nije uradio analizu stanja medijskih sloboda. Ove godine smo to uradili u Srbiji i u Bosni i Hercegovini, ali medijske organizacije. U BiH smo uradili to Vijeće za štampu i BiH novinari uz podršku Civil Rights Defenders organizacije. I upravo smo prije neki dan imali promociju te brošure koja će biti data i parlamentu i svim mogućim organizacijama. To je 27 postulata koje je Vijeće Europe zadalo, formuliralo kako treba da izgleda medijska slobodna slika. I periodični izvještaji su naloženi parlamentima da budu rađeni da bi se vidjelo gdje su rupe, šta treba popraviti, šta je dobro, šta nam još fali. Tako da stvari se pomiču, kažem, ali kroz civilno društvo. Međutim, šta je problem kada je međunarodna zajednica u pitanju? Puna su usta svima media freedom, sloboda izražavanja, sloboda govora, sloboda medija i tako dalje i tako dalje. Kada dođe do dijeljenja novca, kroz IPA projekte konkretno, vi nemate nigdje medija. Ima za sve živo, ali za medije nema. Mislim, šta je onda, gdje smo tu? Ja se stalno pitam u čemu je stvar. Čemu onda tolika priča, speak up conferences i ostalo, a kad trebamo dobiti novce da bismo razvijali tu slobodu, onda mi se borimo da uzmemo mrvice koje ostaju od različitih NGO-a koji se bave raznim drugim stvarima. Naravno, trebaju i oni.
Zašto mislite da je stvar takva? Ja bih rekla pa čak i licemjerna, da u stvari
Evropska
komisija i Evropska unija ima puna usta slobode medija, a u konačnici radi vrlo malo. Dovoljno je pogledati i stare zemlje članice, uzmemo Veliku Britaniju i Murdocha i šta se događalo tamo, a da ne spominjem njihovu potporu koju pružaju zemljama kandidatkinjama i potencijalnim kandidatkinjama na Zapadnom Balkanu. Zašto je to tako? Zašto mislite da je to licemjerje toliko izraženo kad su mediji točno u pitanju?
Dobro, Evropska komisija prošle godine formirala i poseban odjel za medije u Briselu, pa nadajmo se da će sada i nekako se pokrenuti s mrtve tačke. Ja vjerujem u osobe koje tamo rade jer vidim da pokušavaju da aktualiziraju problem medija i kroz taj financijski status. To bi sada zahtijevalo mnogo dublju priču. Mislim,
jesu li preveliki interesi koji se prebijaju preko medija da bi oni uopće htjeli intervenirati?
Upravo to hoću reći. To je moje osobno mišljenje. Ja ne mogu reći da to jeste. Ali tako izgleda, novinarski gledano, analizirajući, očito je nekome u interesu da situacija bude takva kakva jeste. Pričat ćemo mi o tome. Freedom of expression, freedom of media, sve mora biti na papiru, ali kad hoćemo se boriti da to zbilja da bude, da mediji budu samostalni, da se uradi nešto, onda svi kažu to je vaš lokalni problem. To ne može biti lokalni problem ako ništa nije lokalni problem u Bosni i Hercegovini. Od kraja rata na ovamo ništa se na lokalnom nivou ne događa dok međunarodna organizacija ne interveniraju. Konačno još uvijek imamo Ured visokog predstavnika koji ima neograničena ovlašćenja ako ih hoće iskoristiti. Ali u biti mi kad smo imali ogroman problem nedavno sa javnim servisom i kada su civilne organizacije, to jest medijske civilne organizacije, reagirale, visoki predstavnik je rekao pa ja sam bio tamo, nije mi niko rekao da se to dogodilo. Ne zanima ga. Ne zanima ga. Postali su suviše personalni interesi, materijalni personalni interesi, ali isto tako vjerovatno iz nekog plana do kojeg mi još uvijek nismo dobacili vidom neki globalni interesi.
Can you represent us, ICAS, a little bit?
We're trying to strengthen the voice of the citizen with the European Union. I mean, I can imagine in Croatia people are thinking what is the impact of the European Union going to be on us, on our everyday lives. And our message is actually you can also influence the European Union. It's not easy, but there are ways of doing it. For example, we are giving a lot of support at the moment to people who are preparing what are called citizens' initiatives. This means that you have to collect 1 million signatures from a minimum of 7 countries of the 27, soon 28 with Croatia, in the European Union, to present a request to the European Commission to do a draft law. And here at this conference, for example, we've been discussing issues of freedom of expression and media, and we are supporting a citizens' initiative on media pluralism, for example, and we would very much hope that Croatia would join this effort, and you would collect the few thousand signatures necessary to support this initiative.
So Citizens Initiative is a kind of new development in the European Union, which actually is there mentioned to provide a little bit more participation of citizens in decision making. And it developed with Lisbon Treaty as a kind of new form of participation. And is it used until now? Are there any kind of...
It's only just starting. We're just doing a sort of 6-month balance sheet. So it's very new, and it'll take quite some time for it to develop.
And to realize how it would actually function in practice.
Sure.
So but your how you see it? You think it would be successful? It would be something that would be able to motivate people to realize that it can include them in decision making?
Yes, I think it can, because a lot of European legislation is very technical, but in considering citizens' initiatives, people have to come up with things which are much more value-driven and much more human in a way, so that when we're talking about press freedom, it's not just free competition among the media, it's also making sure that freedom of expression under the Charter of Fundamental Rights is respected, and that governments don't interfere with the media, political parties don't interfere with the media. Or if we're talking about a citizens' initiative on water, it's not just respecting environmental standards and safety of drinking water. The initiative is about water as a fundamental human right, a fundamental basic service which should not be commercialized, for example. Or there's another initiative we're working with, which is saying that it's fine for people to have these European rights to move around the Union. But if you settle in another country, why is it you have the right to vote in local and European elections, but not in national elections? I mean, that's a basic democratic deficit. So there's a citizens' initiative called Let Me Vote. So these are creative initiatives which are challenging the European Union to apply better the values that it has.
And all very close to people, actually. People can easily see them in all those issues and their interest in all those issues.
Yeah, and of course, inevitably, when you do that, there are some initiatives which are a little bit crazy or a little bit strange. But that's life. That's life, because and that'll provoke some democratic debate. So this is the beginnings of what people call the European public sphere. Croatia is entering at a very good time in some ways with this Lisbon Treaty, and not forgetting the fact that we already have rights. We can petition the European Parliament, we can complain to the Commission, and sometimes, you know, the rights we have can be protected by the European Court of Justice against our own governments, which is very important.
The fact is, in Croatia, people are kind of passive still. You know, we are not used to there are democratic methods on which we can participate. Do you see Croatian citizens? You are quite often here. Do you see Croatian citizens a little bit different in that manner? Do you think that the Croatian civil society would be able to mobilize them to participate?
Well, I'm always told that it's very difficult and it's not possible. I don't think people are so different fundamentally from different countries. They have the same concerns, and I think they will see the opportunities. For example, at a workshop at this conference, we were looking at freedom of information laws. Do you know that in Croatia and in the other Western Balkans countries, you have freedom of information laws which are far more advanced than the so-called advanced member states?
The
Like,
Serbia's one, for example, is the best one in
but,
Europe. And
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
but this, in Croatia,
it's
is-
also a good one, but still
but,
needs
but there is a
implementation.
huge big gap, yeah? There's a huge big gap, wider than the port of Zadar between the law and its implementation. But slowly, when people get used to using the law, the implementation catches up. So I think one has to be confident, but give it time.
Yes. And ICAS also work on development of civil society in general, but more in particular on Western Balkans in Turkey.
Yeah.
So you are quite interested in this enlargement part of the world currently in new sense. So can you tell us how you observe civil society currently, its status in Western Balkans?
Well, to be honest, I'm amazed. I mean, we did an exercise a bit like this conference 5 years ago in Ljubljana, and that led to a declaration which has served as a kind of benchmarking way of looking at progress. And for this event, we asked each country and Turkey to come with a national report, you know, just saying where are things now. And reading these reports was a revelation. I mean, the amount of legislation which is being developed, you know, slowly dialogue is being developed with governments. The knowledge of the latest developments in civil society is very apparent from these reports. And again, there one can be optimistic. I think the main weakness of which civil society organizations in Croatia are very well aware is that there needs to be much more connection with the citizen, precisely to overcome the problem that you mentioned in your previous questions about lack of civic engagement, and take from the citizens the evidence of their concerns into the political arena to put more pressure on government. So that's the next big challenge, and it's a very, very important one. So here we've been talking about techniques of encouraging participation, and apart from the citizens' initiatives we already discussed, but we're also saying here that it will need, the reform process will need constant vigilance. It was said that we have to make sure about irreversibility of reform.
How to gain that?
Well,
because
I
you
think
know we
it's-
have a kind of political climate which is so unstable and so changeable.
it's,
So from day to day you can be actually facing a fact that certain things that you push to be achieved can really change.
It's the case almost anywhere, and I think what we're saying here is that it's not enough to take the concerns from citizens into the political arena. You have to follow up constantly. Watchdog is the right word, because it's like a terrier. You know, you have to constantly, and for that you need to have funding. You need to have grants for human rights watchdog, media organizations which ensure freedom of expression, and that's been a major theme at this event.
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because when you mentioned the watchdogs, I wanted to ask how to assure that the watchdogs would be able to operate, because even currently in Croatia we are still not seeing tendency that the watchdog would be actually supported from the national funds. I mean, at all. So how you see that those organizations can survive?
Well, I think that
And
I think they have to be very professional, and you have to match the capacity of the administration, which is administering, say, the Freedom of Information law, and for that you need to have good, bright, and there are lots of good, bright young people who are really motivated by this type of work. But it's also true that you need to have some financial support, if preferably within the community. It's no good just doing it with projects. You can't build a civil society with projects. You need support, because this type of watchdog role can't be planned like a project. You have to be constantly seeing everything that moves in the government, and you even have to be ahead of those moves.
How the watchdogs are functioning in all democracies of the European Union? You're quite familiar with Belgium. You're currently based in Brussels, and originally you're coming from United Kingdom, so I guess you're familiar with that civil society too. How they're functioning over there?
Well, I don't think that you can really, I mean, you aspire to the watchdog role, which is constantly monitoring. If you look at the old member states, I think what you'll find is that indeed there are some organizations like State Watch, for example, in the UK, which fulfill this role on a daily basis within a certain category of concerns. But very often this will leave aside other concerns which citizens are concerned about. So you've got to see how you fill those gaps. I think my general impression is that it is not an organized system. Civil society will never be an organized system. But in some countries you have, you know, a density of citizens' advice, legal advice, watchdog organizations, which together make a kind of cluster which actually the government and the parliament cannot ignore, with a very strong credibility with the public.
And can you mention maybe some civil society subsector which is quite strong in that manner, that's organized on that way?
I don't think this part of civil society will ever be that strong or well funded. I mean, what gets well funded in civil society is, as you know, is service delivery, quite rightly.
Yeah.
You know, direct services to people who are unemployed, disabled people. I mean, we're in an economic crisis.
Basically those services which state should provide, and if state is not providing, so then
it's
paying...
a difficult issue where the demarcation line is very often, I agree, but I think that one just has to accept the fact that this watchdog function is actually a difficult area to fund. I mean, I remember taking a ride in a taxi in London, and the taxi driver said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I've got to visit an organization called Liberty." And he thought a bit about this, and he said, "That's interesting. Of course, you're right. We still need organizations like that." But it didn't immediately strike where he didn't immediately recognize this.
Yeah, it's usually like that until people find themselves in a situation when they need help. On the conference, all the country reports from Western Balkans and Turkey were presented, country reports which tells about status of civil society in those countries. And they would serve to actually be a kind of material which would which would be used to produce a next declaration. You were mentioning Ljubljana's declaration. Now we would have a Zadar declaration. What's the differences? Where you see the improvements?
I mean, the difference is that the Ljubljana Declaration was essentially a shopping list, saying, you know, all the things which still had to be done. Now, in the meantime, and it's apparent from all the set of national reports, which is, I think, required reading for anyone concerned about civil society in the region, it's clear that so much progress has been made that we don't need a shopping list anymore. So what we've tried to do is put together in a consensus statement all the bits from the national reports which are trying to give a picture of the situation and what the next steps forward are. So we create that basis. There will be further discussion and amendments, but people have said here quite rightly, do we still need this? We needed the Ljubljana Declaration, but since so much progress has been made, what we now need is an action plan. So beyond this conference, what we are hoping is that people in the region will get together and translate all the wealth of material we've got here and the wealth of material from other sources into an action plan.
Yeah, into the action plans, I guess, in each of the countries.
Yeah, I
or
think
you are counting on a kind of common action. Is it possible at all?
I think you have to do both, because what's being said here is very much that yes, there are common problems to all the countries. The starting point is similar, the processes of reform are similar, but then when you get into the detail, they're taking slightly different paths. So you have to both strengthen regional cooperation and networking and action, and then develop an action plan for each country, probably. But I'm from Brussels, you know. I can help, and I love Western Balkans, but
yes,
it has to be done within Western Balkans.
Yes,
yeah.
So it has to be done with our own forces. With the country reports, we hear all variety of issues which still concerns civil society in Western Balkans and Turkey. For example, to start with the Turkey, you still have a kind of threatening toward the human rights activists and imprisoning them, which is, you know, basic violation of human rights, quite a heavy one. And on the other side, Croatia is already finished negotiations with the European Union for its membership, and it's at least counted that we have several things already done and nicely put it here. So how you can get in peace all those differences within one declaration?
I think you can, because I think the situation in Turkey, which is really worrying, with reforms going backwards and you know, associations trying to survive in a very hostile climate, is a lesson in a way that reforms are never won for good, and you have to be careful, and you need this watchdog role. If you put that report to one side and then you look at all the other ones, then the common threads are really clear, and they're well summed up actually in the report from Croatia, which is saying, you know, everything is rosy, everything is fine, we're just about to join the European Union, and indeed in many areas things are working very well. We have a very good NGO office in the government. We have a very good civil society development foundation. We've had some successes, but then there are areas which are closed. There are areas where the politicians don't want to have any dialogue with civil society. There's lack of transparency. So you have a very varied picture within the country, let alone between the countries.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So how you see Croatian experiences, for example, because we know that Croatian civil society kind of protested when Chapter 23 in Croatia was closed for negotiation. We didn't see benchmarks for Chapter 23, and we know for the fact that certain things are not solved down. For example, the law on right to access to information and similar things. So how you see the Croatian experiences in this manner, civil society experiences in Croatia in negotiation process, relevant for the region?
It's very relevant in that the lesson from Chapter 23 is that unless you can get the Commission to really bring about the reforms for the judiciary and other institutions before accession, you're in difficulties, because once Croatia becomes a member of the European Union, it's certainly possible, but much more difficult, to rely on pressure from the European Commission for reforms. So the only solution is for civil society to make a step change and become much stronger, because it'll be civil society which will follow up these issues. I mean, we've heard here that a coalition on Chapter 23 has been formed to
Yes.
bring together a number of forces, and it's
Yes,
the watchdog
Platform
role.
112.
Yeah, it's the watchdog role we were
Yes.
discussing.
Blah, blah, blah.